All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, is here, and I've got a couple great guests, folks, to talk about a very cutting edge topic. And I've been explaining to some of my analyst friends lately the demo I saw a week or two ago by Stefan Sigg, the CTO of Everest Systems. He's going to be on the show today along with Sandeep Chopra. He's the CEO. And it blew my mind. And I have to say, we're going to talk about ERP, enterprise resource planning. Companies like SAP, for example, they have an ERP. There are lots of different smaller ERP vendors out there, but ERP is really, really important for lots of reasons. One, because it runs core business. It runs your operation. It keeps track of all the stuff you're selling, where it goes, who gets it. All that stuff comes out of ERP. Now, there are different modules. SAP, of course, has lots of different modules. They have Field Glass for hiring. They have some system for procurement. They have a whole bunch of different things, but altogether you call that ERP. Well, the challenge of ERP historically has been that it's very hard to change because it is a very robust system. It's bulletproof. It's designed to always work and to be just perfect in a certain way, but it's rigid. And yeah, you figure SAP, German company. The Germans are very good engineers. They're very good mechanics, but they have their own way of doing things, and you got to follow their way or it's the highway. They don't really care. And that got even more pronounced with the rollout of SRP, I'm sorry, with the SAP HANA, S4 HANA, which was this in-memory version. So Hasso Plattner, one of the smartest guys around. I mean, super, super smart guy and a super nice guy too, very candid. He's one of the founders of SAP. He saw the future probably 25 years ago now, or over 20 years ago, I think. And he knew that at some point in the future, spinning disk would cross over with flash memory. And his vision was, hey, we can build a system that'll just run in memory so we don't have to worry about all these spinning disks that are so slow and they break down. It's such a problem. So he saw that coming, but he didn't see Kubernetes coming. And that's my prediction. He didn't really see that happening. And Kubernetes kind of threw a bit of a wrench in the works for those guys because it's this orchestration platform that spun out of Google, which is very interesting stuff. Well, what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is that SAP ERP is very hard to change. And this is a problem. Then when they went to S4 HANA, they said, okay, you got to trim down your model to this basic model. Well, guess what? Lots and lots and lots of companies all around the world did all type of modifications to their ERP system over the years. They had to add functionality, certain features, integrations, all kind of stuff that made it no longer vanilla SAP. It made it a much more complex and more suitable for their business, but nonetheless difficult to maintain. So that's what they call a brownfield. So if you want to do a brownfield move over as opposed to a greenfield, greenfield is like net new, brand new. So if you do that for SAP's S4 HANA, okay, that's not as painful. A brownfield from your existing system to this new system, good luck. Right? I've met the guys who do this stuff. They're very stressed out. They smoke cigarettes all day long because that's how stressed out they are because it's very, very difficult to do properly. There are so many loose ends to tie. Like that's the thing. It's just very, very complex. Well, folks, AI has finally reached ERP. And I took a demo from these guys like a couple weeks ago, and there was one line. Maybe I'll start with Stefan Sigg first, because he said this and he showed me this whole process of coming up with a new application, a new product that we want to move out there. And normally, that this would start with a meeting. It would take probably 6 weeks to 2 months, maybe 3 months to pull off the requirements gathering, the specs, the conversations. All these things take a long, long time, which again is why it's very hard to change in the old world. It's almost impossible. It's so hard that you just don't do it. Is basically what happens, and so you have to do all these modifications downstream somewhere. That's what makes it a brownfield, which makes it hard to move. So the point, it's like a classic case of lock-in. It's like hardcore. You are locked into this environment and you're just going to stick with it and stay with it. Well, Everest ERP is a new company with Stefan and Sandeep that have founded, and they had a very different worldview. Their worldview is no, we want to be able to let our clients change as they need to change. So what they did is they focused on building out a sandbox, not just a data sandbox, but a process sandbox. So you can kind of think through, all right, what if we added a new line of business? What if we added a new car line? What if we added a new a new geography? All these sort of what if questions that business analysts want to get answers to. That's who they're catering to. And now in this environment, you can spin up all the specs for a new application or a new module in your ERP system, and it doesn't take much of time at all. And Stefan, what you said to me, it just blew my mind because you showed me the specs. So you go to in the background, you give it all these, you tell what you want in natural language. We want a application that does X, Y, Z, PDQ. Here's how we want it to work, et cetera. You have to be very specific. And then it builds out the specs for you. And you showed them to me, and they were just pristine. And you said, no human can write specs like this. And that's when it really clicked in my head. I'm like, wow, this is the ideal marriage of Gen AI and programming and application development. Because if you give it enough specificity, it will be exactly correct. And even the diagrams and everything, you have to make sure you walk through it all, make sure it all works. But
Mm.
man, and then of course, if you're really, really, really ready, you hit the big build button and it just builds the thing for you. And then, something that honest to God would take 6 months and still fail can now be done ideally in days and work. Is that right, Stefan?
Yeah, that's right. And but there are three ingredients that come together. And you stole a lot of thunder already, Eric,
Sorry.
from myself. So what are the three? So number one is primitive prompts won't do the cut. They just don't, because you need too many of those prompts in order to tell AI what you want to build. If it's
Mm,
not like a trivial thing, yeah.
hmm.
If it is like for example, a cash flow optimization and planning tool, if it is an objective and key results app, or whatever you can think of as a business app on top of something, yeah. So
Right.
that's quite sophisticated. So you need more than just prompts. And our conclusion was what you need is proper specification. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that is preventing you from having the AI models get lost in nowhere, because they just have this, finite context window, and you cannot leave that context window if you want to stay, on a converging line of what the code generation concerns. So that is one, that the code generation of a sophisticated business app needs a specification as a mega prompt in the beginning. Number
Hmm.
two, you cannot build a sophisticated business app just on top of a database. It's
Mm.
just too much. Yeah. So a business app that needs accounting, you cannot generate accounting. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You don't generate an operating system. You don't generate a database. So if you need to have a business app, you need to assume as much as possible from a generic, foundation. And that foundation is not generated. It is traditionally coded. It does not do any hallucination. It is completely deterministic. It prevents you from going to jail in the extreme case, right? So that is number two, a solid business or ERP foundation. We call it a business operating system. And number three is what you just mentioned, is this notion of a live sandbox, which means I can do all that in a branch of our system that exactly looks like the productive system, but it isn't. It is just an image of that. And the technology is ensuring that you cannot do anything wrong in that branch of the system. And if you're all great and everything is fine, you merge it back. That's an option. You can also leave it there in the sandbox, but you can merge it back. And it's, in my point of view, the ideal combination of having an agile system and a consistent system at the same time.
Yeah, right. So the way he described it, and folks, we'll get him to do a demo for a separate broadcast that we'll publish because it's very impressive. The bottom half is all the deterministic stuff. So this
Exactly.
sandbox is connected to, for example, you might want to connect it to your payable system, your receivable system, the actual transacting systems that are
Exactly.
pulling the money, that ship the product. Those things are separate. But what the sandbox does, it allows you to envision an application and to then define what it does, how it acts, what the parameters are, all the kinds of things that you do in requirements gathering, which has always been a nightmare. Everyone will tell you requirements gathering is a very, very difficult thing. And it's because people forget about certain things. They forget to mention this or that in the conversation, and so it wasn't captured. And then in the old days, it was this sort of throw it over the wall process where it's like, all right, we'll talk to you guys, then we'll just give you a bunch of documents. You come back in 6 weeks, go, okay, is this guy what you wanted? And usually it's no, it's not. There's not this, there's not that. So this collapses that whole process into one environment. That's the sandbox, the industrial grade sandbox, where all the key stakeholders can get together and watch as it's all built out. And then boom, it's like, I mean, that is a huge sea change in how this stuff gets done, right, Stefan?
Absolutely agreed.
Yeah. Well, let's bring in Sandeep. He's been nodding politely in the background there. I told Stefan when he first came on the call, that line just keeps sticking in my head. He said, no human could write specs like this. That is such an interesting observation. And I think it really speaks. It's just like any of the other cool things you see from generative AI. Like you ask it to write again about widely published topics where there is consensus, it's going to get everything pretty much perfect. And it'll do it in almost no time. No human being can write a 10-page paper in 1 minute. You just simply can't do that. Well, these models can now in certain domains. Now you have to be careful because it is
Mm.
generative. So that's where there's this separation of concerns, deterministic versus sandbox. But Sandeep, how'd you get this idea? Like, where did this come from? I mean, this is pretty impressive.
I mean, this was a thing that the team decided on together. Our co-founder, co-CEO, based out of Germany. His name is Franz Farber. He was some of the brains behind SAP HANA and the brains behind this idea as well. What we all talked together, Franz, Stefan, and I, was really, I think, exactly what you just mentioned, right? If you look at it, like the software is the production of thoughts that are to some degree known to the world and to some degree art. I
Hmm.
mean, I'll call it handcrafted,
Hmm.
right? And I think what AI Specify is doing a great job of is making it systematic, what is common knowledge, and codifying it in a way much better than before, where
Hmm.
you can look at competitive output, you can look at the learnings that are in the public domain, you can look at the financial statements of public companies, right? You can use all that input much more systematically than people really ever do to come up with their handcrafted version.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that the handcrafted requirements or frankly the handcrafted code is going to completely go away,
Hmm.
because what the world's knowledge that's relevant for a particular area may not have the level of specificity that a particular company needs to make its operation successful. So it's
Right.
really great input. It's really good technology powering behind it all, but you still need some handcrafted input. And I
Hmm.
think what AI Specify really allows you to do in combination with the other pieces that Stefan mentioned, and in particular the sandboxing technology, is it actually gives you a platform through which you can organize the mixing of the handcrafted thoughts and code with the generated code and put it in one system, and you have the ability to test and iterate it using these sandboxes. I think
Yeah.
when you combine these two things, you're getting the best of both worlds, right? You're getting the best of your knowledge of a particular customer in a particular market with the general knowledge of the world that's coming from AI.
Yeah, and you mentioned the market data, for example, and in the demo that I watched, Stefan was able to show how you guys did a search and found, okay, there are these three other applications out there, these three other systems that look similar to what we're trying to build. I mean, you could even scan GitHub, but to your point, you could even target the filings of public companies and just kind of see, huh, well, these guys are not doing too well. These guys are doing well. What's the analysis behind that? Is it because of this product offering or that product offering? I mean, that whole world is changing rapidly as well because of all this intelligence, right? I mean, it's really quite remarkable what you can now glean from information systems. And, frankly, I think this is a bit of an aside, but I think we're going to be going down a very different path in terms of business media in the near future because a lot of what traditional media has amounted to is just cherry picking and narrative driven theories or ideas or whatever. Whereas now, if you can actually reach into these filings and generate content that explains them, it's like, holy Christmas. But you're able to do that in this environment. So you can see, hey, this market, let's say we want to build, I don't know, a new CRM tool or something. All right, well, how many CRM tools are there? A lot of them may be very popular, but they're also long in the tooth, right? I mean, there's such a thing as technical debt that you have to watch out for. And I'm seeing a lot of SaaS blowback these days. There's a lot of SaaS sprawl. There are companies that have, 8, 10, 15 different SaaS applications.
Oh yeah.
They don't integrate very well. Okay, maybe you can build a data warehouse. You go get Snowflake or Databricks and integrate it that way. Do you really have to do all that work to optimize your business? And I would say the short answer is no. I think if you can if you can make the changes to the core business technology that runs your operation, that's called shifting left, right, Sandeep?
I mean, I think one of the funny things is I think in the last 20, 25 years with much more open cloud architectures, it sure has made integrations easy, but actually has not made building processes and running companies easier.
Hmm,
In fact, you could argue they're slower in some ways than they were in the past when processes are consolidated. So I think
interesting.
what we're trying to do now is to get the best of both worlds, right? You're trying to get the best with AI and these connected services that you can generate ideas into functionality faster. That's new applications. But I think the impact of that is when your application development can be at that pace, the value then is in how you stitch together this whole system together. You
Hmm.
shouldn't need nearly as many integrations as you needed in the past. And
Right.
you certainly can focus far more on the quality and the process of the data that you have rather than just the plug and play of the integration architecture. I think if
Wow.
companies are able to master that, they're talking less about how do I get my CRM to talk to my ERP or how do I get
Right.
my PSA to talk to my ERP. That's not the conversation that matters at the C-suite level. The
Right.
conversation that matters at the C-suite level is, right? How do I launch products faster? How do I make pricing changes? How do I acquire companies faster? If those are the conversations you're having and your ERP is an enabler for that, then I think you've done something special.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, because I sit around and think about this stuff all the time, and in the industry, we've done a lot of great things, and there is all this innovation everywhere, and that's wonderful if you can tie it all together. But there is such a thing as an unwieldy environment. That's just there are too many tools being used, just the different logins for all these different people, managing who does what in which environment. I mean, I've worked with like HubSpot and Marketo and some of these other things, and they're pretty complex and
Yeah.
they're pretty stiff in that sense. And so they're not very agile and they kind of hold the business back to a certain extent. And, a lot of this stuff is going to change in the fairly
Yeah.
near future. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back in our show on AI ERP, talking to the gentleman from Everest Systems. Don't touch the dial. Be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to Sandeep Chopra and Stefan Sigg of Everest ERP. I joked at the top of the hour, we're going to climb the mountain together, guys. This is it's good stuff. You got to love the name. And I'm not surprised to hear that another SAP genius is behind all this. That's usually the way these things happen. Someone's with a big company, they see how things work, they learn a lot, and then eventually, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do it a different way. And they sprout off and do their own thing. And that happens all the time. And with the ERP, it's really good stuff because again, I mean, I won't say there hasn't been a lot of innovation in ERP. There certainly has been. There's no doubt about that. But it's still not very agile. That's the thing, is it's still very stoic, very stodgy, very hard to change. And it's because, it's bulletproof. It needs to be bulletproof. It's like a tank as opposed to a Jeep, right? It's this big, strong thing that you don't want it to be taken down, but it's not very agile. And so that's a problem. But in this new world of subscription-based services, SaaS providers, for example, that's a really interesting opportunity because they don't have to go down the route of old world ERP. They can explore these, and that's your target audience, right, Sandy?
Exactly. I think from the very beginning of the company, what we were after was how do you make these systems bulletproof but hyper changeable? Then the
Hmm.
question is, well, you can sell ERP to every company in the world. At the core of it, everyone needs a financial and operating system, right? So then, but
Right.
then how do you segment the tens of thousands of companies, even larger, that you can sell this to? And so we just went after in the beginning an industry that is always wanting to change. It is the industry that is the most venture backed in the world. It's the
Hmm.
industry that launches products faster than any other industry, and it's also, frankly, an industry that we understand.
Hmm.
And so it was very easy for us to make the selection to start with software SaaS, and then to be able to then take our learnings from that and the processes like subscription, like recurring revenue, modifications, cloud costs, global people costs, and then take those problems to graduate from that industry in the long run to be able to go to other industries. Because guess what? I mean, it's all over the news, right? Every industry is trying to mimic the models of the software industry to become a technology company of some kind. So, and
Right.
what does that really mean behind the scenes? It means they want to be able to move as fast as software
Right.
companies do.
Right. Yeah, Stefan, maybe I'll throw it over to you. I definitely see how software as a service is low-hanging fruit. They are fast-moving companies, and we talked before about brownfield versus greenfield, right? Brownfield is a little bit more complicated. Greenfield, that new company, hey, you can go down whatever road you want. That's a great avenue. What else would they need? Like, let's say you find a company, it's budding, they're just about to come out of stealth. What do they need in place in order to leverage Everest ERP in the most responsible way? What do they have to have, or do they need anything?
Well, what they need is that comes with growth. So you see another characteristic of software companies, they grow fast. So they need to have a platform, they need to have a solution that grows with them. When they go into international business, when they, have entities all over the world, or in the beginning, maybe 3 or 4 countries, yeah, when they are selling in different regions, in different currencies, when they have to close the books in different regions of the world. So that is something that, the underlying business platform needs to have, as capabilities, as features in the end also. So that comes on top of the agility and on top of the of course, the flexibility of what we talked about, what if, and these things. But you ideally want to make once a choice of your ERP, and then it stays with you, it grows with you, it goes international, it scales technically, it scales cloud wise, it scales AI wise, and that is what software companies need very quickly. And basically, that's what every company needs in the end.
That's very interesting, and you reminded me of something that I've thought about many times. And in a way, I love this concept of a flywheel, because a flywheel
Yes,
captures energy from one side and kind of stores it and allows it to be leveraged on the other side in a continuous fashion. And this ERP, this sandbox environment, is kind of like that, because on the one side, you've got needs of the customer, the business, things are changing over here. On the other side, you've got AI changing by the day. And
yes.
so how do you find a way to pull in the power from all this AI and responsibly leverage it without disrupting things? And that is a platform, but it's like, what platform would that be? Well, the one that makes the most sense is ERP, because it runs your core business. But I just haven't seen that, right? And it's like, you look at all these SaaS companies, they're all sort of rolling out their own little AI chatbots. I mean, there's a story I've heard about Stack Overflow, which is a very popular website in the development world. It's where people go to file with, I have a
Yes.
problem, what's going on. They lost, I heard, 50% of their web traffic because of Copilot, because
Yes.
people are in GitHub and they're just asking Copilot. Well, no one wants to swivel to another app. Everyone wants everything to be right here, but that's never really happened before, right? Because it's hard to do. It's hard to map out some model, some screen that gives you everything you possibly want, right? It's almost impossible. But the point is that shows you how much things are changing. I mean, that is a massive change, and it's going to affect lots of publishers. Like, I tell you that, they're all like, "Whoa, what are we going to do now?" I mean, I'm kind of in that boat myself. It's like, all right, well, the whole world's changing. What are we going to change around? So my point is, like, it's important to have this structure which is strong enough but can connect to both sides, to all the new
Yeah.
stuff that's coming and all your stuff. Isn't that right, Stefan?
Yeah, you need to have the right architecture and the right technology in order to participate from that incredibly fast development of technology.
Right.
So if you're only a little bit proprietary here and there, you cannot participate. Yeah. So that happened to companies in the past when, remember when browser UIs went so fast. Yeah. And
Right.
today was this kind of technology, this UI package, and then React came, and we had to do something in React, and God knows what is tomorrow. So you need to have an architecture that says, okay, be my guest. I can take any kind of those UI packages. And now it's the same with AI. So you want to be in a situation where you are just, impatiently waiting for the next big update on the AI models, and you just click a button and you can consume it. That's exactly what we have. That's exactly what the system is built for. And that is, you cannot work against that. You have to work with it.
Right.
And you cannot, if you try to, fiddle around and say, oh, but in this corner, I'm better than AI. Come on. Yeah. So AI is so incredibly powerful. You want to get the whole momentum of the wave for your
Wow.
system.
Wow. That's a really interesting way to think about it too. So, I mean, in a way, this innovation that's coming from the marketplace, from all these new technologies, you want to be able to incorporate it almost like you put gas in your car, basically,
Yeah.
right? It's like that's the fuel. I mean, data you could say is the fuel, but Sandeep, I'll throw it over to you maybe. The key again is to have this robust chassis. Let's use the car analogy, right? The chassis is very strong. Even if it gets knocked over, it's not going to bend. It's really, really good. And it allows you to bring in, like the race cars. Like I've driven through, if you go through Southern Illinois, because I've done a lot of driving, there are a lot of racetracks down there. You go to a gas station where you can get like, it's like 989 or 102 or 135 octane. Like, holy crap, what's that? That's for the race cars, right? But if you put that in your car, you might blow the engine up or something. But my point is that you guys have this very powerful chassis now that you've
Yep.
built, which can go, which can basically be the foundation of the next generation company, right?
I think another way to say that, I think I agree with everything Stefan said, is I think you said is really, are you trying to, are you going to win because your car has an extra feature? Or are you going to win because you could make a different kind of car entirely because you
Right.
made a better factory?
Exactly.
Right? And so, and I
Wow.
think we're a factory company, right? And so
Wow.
for us, AI permeates the factory.
Right.
And what does that really mean? I think you're going to find a lot of players look to Stefan's point, when the world is changing, either you're changing it or you're on the wrong side of history. So the fact that people are incorporating AI
That's a
is
quote.
not like a new thought, right? It's like every company, regardless of whether it's 50 years old, 5 years old, and regardless of what market of software they're in, they're incorporating AI. But
Right.
most of them are incorporating AI into features and trying to
Right.
tie them to very specific use cases that people can understand today in the market so they can sell those features to customers. Are we
Right.
doing the same thing? Of course. But that's not transformational, right? What's transformational is, how is AI going to help you fundamentally have a different enterprise architecture? Are you going to
Right.
need 50 applications to solve one business problem? Or instead, you're going to need three strategic ones from three strategic players, right? And how will the data and the process work? Will you as a company have to go to third-party vendors every time to build new applications as you go to a new market or a new
Wow.
industry? Or will you be able to build it on your own? Because the factory is so good that actually it's not even that hard to build it on your own anymore.
Right.
I
Well,
think
this
if
is
those are the changes you can enable, I think then you have a different kind of problem statement you're after and a different kind of market.
Well, so that's an excellent point that you just made, and it's really, I mean, it's worthy of a show in and of itself, because what we're seeing, it's a very, very powerful inflection point. We've got a show on August 21st, first with a company called Ascendian, and they've been doing agent first DevOps now for a number of years. So they don't even have, their developers don't sit down and write code. They've been using agentic DevOps for a while now. So, but some people are calling it vibe coding. I mean, there are different ways to describe these things. Claude is very powerful. I've talked to many people who are using Claude for the code generation, and it's really, really good. Now you got to be careful what you give it access to, because like there was the story of the guy with Replete where it killed his database and then apparently lied about it. I'm like, what on earth is going on here? Do not give access to the deterministic world. Like, no, no, no. You have to cordon that off. Go ahead, Stefan.
Cannot happen with sandbox, by the way,
Yeah,
that somebody deletes your whole database. Impossible.
that's great.
Impossible.
That's
You
great.
work in the sandbox, and you cannot physically, you cannot delete the main database.
That is just too funny. I mean,
Just
that's
side
right.
remark.
It's like, so, but things are changing so fast now that people don't know that stuff yet. A lot of people just don't know. They're like, oh, okay, let's use this new tool. But anyway, back to the very interesting point that Sandeep was making is that with the right factory, if you can build whatever you need, you don't have to go out and buy all this third-party software. And so that's going to be a very interesting straw in the wind for all these software companies that have been around for a while. There are lots of good ones. I mean, there's so much cool functionality out there, but you're starting to see overlap. But the point is, just throw it back to you, Sandeep. If you can build it your own, if you can roll your own, then you own that. You don't have to pay licensing costs to XYZ vendor. I mean, I would argue years ago, that's probably why you saw this whole explosion of open source databases because people got tired of paying Oracle. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's that's the choice that companies are going to have to make. And I think from at least from my history in software, I think you're going to really have the first time in the history of software where the build it your own has become so easy
Yeah.
that companies, when they want to move fast, will be able to move with the rigor of an ERP, but be able to
Mm,
build it on their own, right? And so
wow.
then the question, then it becomes a business decision. What are the kinds of things that I want to build on my own? Versus what are the kinds of things I want to rely on a software provider for? And what's so special about these software providers that they're giving me that I have to build on top of them versus somebody else, right? And
Right.
our take on it is, and as Stefan already articulated, when you provide the foundation of this business operating system, when you provide all these protected services, including sandboxing, that you cannot screw this up, when you provide the business foundation, including accounting, billing, RevRec, and others, well, that's an amazing foundation for you to go build anything on top of. Does it mean
Right.
that Everest will also build some applications on top? Of course, we will. We'll build the strategic ones that have to work right out of the box for customers because they're really complicated. But if
Right.
customers really want to move fast and do something different and a new market in Asia or a new product they're introducing, they can also build on their own.
Right. Well, the roll your own, I mean, historically, roll your own got people into trouble because the documentation wasn't very good. And so when that person left, for example, it's like, uh-oh, we don't know how to fix this thing anymore. Where can you call Bob? Would he pick up the phone? But now a lot of this Gen AI stuff does the documentation for you. So it's like a lot of the reasons why you shouldn't do rolling your own processes are kind of out the window now. Stefan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, yes, it does. Not only does it do the documentation, it does the code itself.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, it is much, much cheaper. I
Right.
mean, even if you always wanted to have your custom application, by the way, which is differentiating you from others,
Right.
it was in the past quite expensive. I mean, you have to hire developers on your own payroll, or you have to pay one of these consultancy companies that do the body leasing. That's heck of a expensive thing. And there's an open thing about maintenance and upgradability and versions and all that.
Right.
In this new world that now we have embarked into,
Right.
these are all solved problems.
Right.
And people can come back and say, okay, I exactly wanted to have this way because that's how I imagine to run the company.
Right. Well, and the other side of the equation here, and we got our next break coming up here in just a second, is that, when the group gets together to design this application, you're capturing all this information in the call. What everyone says is in the call. It's all captured. So you can go back and say, okay, well, you had said this before. Now that's changing. So this is another one of these aspects that is a problem solved.
Hmm.
Before, you either forgot something or you didn't know who said what. Now you can go right back to it and see the whole document. Everything is all in there. So from an audit trail perspective, from a
Yes.
corporate perspective, from an onboarding perspective of new people coming into the organization, I mean, all these problems are solved out of the box, and that is just outstanding. But folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, yours truly, Eric Kavanagh with Stefan Sigg and Sandeep Chopra of Everest ERP. Very cool, Everest Systems, I should say. And they have this product AI Specify, which I love. It's just fantastic. I've seen a demo of this stuff. It's absolutely amazing, and I think it is the future. It's the future of ERP. It's so much more agile and complete in a lot of different ways. And it's solved for a lot of the old problems of ERP, which were stodginess, slow to change, don't mess with it, leave it alone. I mean, ERP is what operations people use all day. So you can't take chances. You can't take chances with something that might break because then you're just losing money. But the other interesting thing here is, being able to tap it into your existing systems, and then over time, being able to displace third-party software with functionality inside your core business. Because, a lot of this stuff, you think like customer data platforms, right? I was talking to a guy from a CDP last week. customer data, it's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time and it can do lots of different things, but it's still this separate platform that then ties into your business in different ways and thus requires integration and API calls and all these things, and that's fine. But it's not as good as changing it in the core business. Because if you can change it in your core processes, you don't need to worry about the third party tools. Now I realize I'm always, getting over my skis on these shows because I'm like, oh, you can do this and you can do that. And you're like, guys are like, all right, hold on. Let's get this done first and then we'll talk about that. But still, in terms of long-term vision, that's pretty accurate, right, Sandeep?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think then it comes down to exactly as you mentioned, right? Like, which is if the long-term bet is correct, that we're moving toward a more consolidated world with fewer strategic players, right? Then the question is, well, can a company, well, you got new companies that are going to put their first ERP in, and and then hopefully it's the first and the last. Then that's in
Right.
some ways an easier decision. But a lot of companies have ERPs, or
Right.
well, actually, there've been ERPs that have really been relegated in many cases to just accounting backends along with 30 other solutions around them. But
Right.
how does a company with something like that architecture today, that's a more sizable company, get toward this more consolidated vision, right? And I think
Right.
the journey to get there obviously is not to take all 30 systems out at once and disrupt your business in that way. That's a change management problem at the human level, not just the technology level, but
Right.
is to take on a phased journey where you start to consolidate your processes from some of your core systems around your core financial platform and then move out from there over time.
Right. Right, and basically do the mapping, try to see what you've got. And Stefan, it's funny, you can actually use a lot of this Gen AI stuff for ideas about how to do those things. I mean, yes, there are still some problems here and there. I've seen some errors. There's some strange things going on with the
Yeah.
latest Chat GPT 5.0. I noticed you can't toggle to the different models anymore. Like they just took it over. So I thought that was an interesting change, interesting development. But the point is, I think it would be a fun job. It would be challenging, but I think Sandeep is right that you start and you just start looking around. Okay, what can we possibly pick off first? Is it something related to a customer data platform? Is it related to supply chain? Is it related to reporting or whatever the case may be? Kind of map that out, find your target, and then build. Because the thing with the sandbox is you can build it out and say, okay, this is what it would look like. Is that doing the stuff that you were doing before? And business be like, well, gosh, I guess it is. Like, okay, we can, because there's a lot of money being spent on SaaS. I got a guy, a good friend of mine, he's in the publishing business, and he's looking at a technology that my other friend has. He's like, oh, maybe your tool can do everything that we're doing now with all these other tools. I'm like, yeah, I think he can. And when you could pull that off, that's just a big win, right, Stefan?
Yes, and the really cool thing is we can do that together with others, together with customers, together with partners. So we do not claim that we know all the bells and whistles of all these business domains. We absolutely love to work with domain experts in special areas. I give you an
Hmm.
example. Professional service automation. So Sandeep said we started with software companies, SaaS companies in the beginning as our target company, target customer. And quite a few of them came back to us, also prospects, say, hey, that's great. We love your functionality, revenue recognition and so on. But you also have some consultants running. Can you also bill the consultants, time management, projects, and all that? And we said, not yet. But then we found a great partner, a PS company themselves, an SI themselves. They also liked our platform and said, hey, why not moving together? And you bring in your domain expertise. We specify everything that is needed to be a professional service automation layer on top of an ERP. I mean, the invoicing and all their sales order, that's all there. What we needed was time management, project management, and some special things that you need for invoicing consultants. And we did it together, and boom, in a record time, we will ship it later this year. We have a whole new application on top of Everest in basically no time. Yeah.
Wow.
And the chances that we hit the nail are very, very high because these are consultants, and there was literally no air between their feedback and the spec because we generated it together.
Right. That gets back to the perfect specs. I'll never
Yeah.
forget that quote. It's just really,
Yeah.
it's really funny because, I've had a belief for a long time now. Anytime a machine can do a better job than a person, cost effectively. Let the machine do the job, man. It's like mail sorting. You want to like sort mail by hand? Good luck. They have machines that do that stuff now, and they're extremely good. Even the toll booths. I mean, I'm annoyed here in the States. We have all these toll booths now where you don't put the change in anymore. You just drive through and they flash your license plate and then they send you the bill in the mail. I'm like, all right, I wish I could just throw the quarters again because I suck at mailing things. I'm just really bad at it. It's not my core area of strength. But the point is that is innovation and it's happening everywhere and you have to roll with it. So I think that we are at the beginning, and I'll throw this over to you, Sandeep. I think we're at the beginning of a pretty major transformation in business technology, in how things get done, in where they get done, and who we trust to get them done. I think that is a huge deal. And a lot of these legacy companies, I think they're so big that it's difficult to move quickly. I mean, I've seen it with some of the even really, really, really big ones. One of the knocks on Google is that they'll get into a new space and they'll start to get somewhere and then they just pull the string and kill the project. I've heard like 10 people tell me that from different parts of the world. So it's like, all right, it's hard to do. It's hard to do,
Yes.
especially at scale. And I think what you guys have built now is a very powerful engine for innovation. That's really what it boils down to. It's like an
Hmm.
innovation and business execution engine, right,
Yes.
Sandeep?
100%. I think it's changing the nature of the roles. And I think that's why it's the thing you're pointing out. It's going to change the nature of how the software industry builds software.
Mm.
Because, it's like, what's the book on building software in the last 20 years with agile and cloud computing? It's basically, you don't really know what the customer wants anyway. So, like, no one really knows, right? Really what the customer wants. So they're like, well, we'll talk to customers and then we guess what they want, but don't build it too big because it's probably wrong anyway, and then go ship that thing as small as you can. They call that an MVP, right? And then you just guess, 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 and hopefully you sign the right customers, right? So that you can guess correctly and build something that kind of the broadly the market needs, right? And so that's all fine. So basically you said, I don't really know what to solve for. So I chopped it up into such small chunks to make my risk quotient go low enough so I can adjust
Wow.
faster, right? That's essentially what Agile has been for a long time. But now we're
Wow.
saying is like, well, what if like there's just less middle layers needed? What if the customer, in other words, just to switch around, who is the domain expert? Like who knows better what their business needs in the long run? Does the software vendor know better what a company's business needs, or does the company know better what strategy they're trying to execute, what product they're trying to make? So the closer you can bring the business expert that really has that quote unquote handcrafted knowledge
Right.
together with an innovation platform to connect their
Wow.
knowledge to technology that can generate, iterate upon that knowledge. Well, it's obvious, I think, that that's going to reduce the cycle time to get to product market fit and to get to real customer success.
Right. That's a bunch of really interesting observations there. I think you're exactly correct on Agile and what it is and why it is that way. It's because, oh, well, we don't really know what they want, so don't build too much. That's why you do the MVP and you kind of iterate out from there. Wow. That is I'm gonna have to think about that one, man. That was like Stefan's quote from last time. I gotta sit around and think about that a bit. But it's true, and it's everywhere. It's like, this is gonna cascade across industries too. I mean, you can kind of just sense this coming now, but there are smart people on the front end who are exploring new ways of doing things. I mean, like I said, you think about the impact of Chat GPT just giving you these answers instead of the Google model, which was to give you links to where you would go find the answers. I mean, that is a monstrous change. What is it? Is it maybe 1 or 2% of people who will actually click on the citations to go to the original articles? Well, that's how everyone was trying to get people to come to their website. So if all of a sudden it's like shutting off all the highways and now it's just, back roads, it's going to change traffic patterns. I'll tell you that right now. And that's the size of change we're dealing with. So build versus buy, that's the one we're doing next week. I actually put it buy versus build. Like maybe you should just build it yourself these days. And you can, if the environment, it's like, IDEs, integrated development environments. Those have been around a long, 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 long time. I've been a huge fan of open source software and it's helped us get a long, long way because you can kind of see it out in the open. And there are lots of good things happening there too. But the key is to get it just for your business. And that's what you guys have enabled. But folks, podcast bonus segment coming up next. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
But
All right, folks, back here on a fascinating show with Sandeep Chopra and Stefan Sigg of Everest Systems. They have a new ERP. It is a super powerful ERP it's all built around the sandbox. That's what I like is that the whole vision was, look, let's solve for the most critical flaw in the existing environment, which is agility. let's make it to where people can build new things quickly that are bulletproof, that are already connected to our system, that already know our protocols, our rules, our governance, our data, all that stuff. And let's focus on that to enable the next generation. So Sandeep, I'll throw it over to you. That's what you've got now. What's in the roadmap?
Yeah, I think right from the get-go of the company, I think what we're seeing in customers is pretty good evidence that we're getting a healthy mix, about half each, of people putting in their first ERP and people putting and replacing their ERP. And we started, as you mentioned earlier, in the SaaS software industry. Now we're graduating to adjacent industries. We mentioned professional services automation earlier, so software and services, and then also into inventory, so software and hardware, and then deeper into physical goods as well, and broadening out finally the overall footprint of this business operating system that we have. So beyond accounting into FP&A with headcount planning as well.
Yeah, so business, oh, the business operating system, right? Because that's what it is. And Stefan, I'll throw it over to you. You know, the fact that you in this environment have access to all the enterprise data, that in and of itself is a pretty cool deal, right? Because a lot of times you're using synthetic data. By the way, one of
Yeah.
the things I've heard from my developer friends about developing with synthetic data with AI is that the AI can't get rid of that synthetic data. It's like a dog with a bone. So you got to be careful using synthetic data anyway. And you don't really want to use synthetic data. You want to use your
Oh,
real corporate
yes,
data so you have a
yes.
a real vision of what's actually happening, right, Stefan?
Uh, yeah, it's unbeatable to show the system on live data. It's unbeatable to create new capabilities, new apps, new verticals on top of real live data. It has never been so easy to do that than with the concept of live sandboxing. And
Yeah.
by the way, it's not only easy, it's also much more secure, and it is much more, let's say, uh, much less error prone, because you have been building the stuff on top of the complexity of the productive data. Yeah. And there
Hmm.
cannot be any surprise anymore if you push into production. Then, oh my God, the volumes are different, the complexity is different. It's impossible because you always work on that.
Right. Yeah, it's your real environment. I mean,
Yeah.
it's your data, it's your environment, it's your policies, your protocols. Because if you use synthetic data, you know, who knows what the difference would have been. You can inspect it all day long, and you're not going to
And,
find some problem in there somewhere.
and by
And
the way, what I want to stress that, of course, we still have authorizations. And,
hmm
having a system that is, showing you the productive data doesn't mean that every user can see all productive data.
right,
Absolutely not, of course. But
right.
the ones who can.
Yeah. And that's, so again, and you track everything inside there too, right? So
Yeah.
you know who built this one, who built that one, what the results were. You can go back in and change things. I mean, it really is giving a window. It's like a panel into the systems that are running the organization. And we've never really had that before. Right. I mean, that's part of, like, you look at process mining, for example, and where process mining came from, which I think is a fascinating technology. What are they doing? And like Celonis is out there tracking the data footprints across different systems and then showing you what's really happening. I remember learning about that a few years ago, and Anthony Dayton was over there, in fact, and he was giving me the demo. And then he said, "Yeah, we can actually write back to the ERP." It's like, you can write back to the ERP. I was like, "Look, you just changed the life of the business process analyst. That person was the most unhappy, depressed human being in the world, because anytime he found some great idea or she found some great idea, she did have to call someone and say, 'Hey, I figured out how to do this better. Can you change the system?' And they'd be like, 'No, leave us alone.' Click." Like, now, if you can change it, oh my God, that's my epiphany back then. Was that is like the biggest change of any single person's job I've ever seen, because it went from being really hard and very unrewarding to not as hard and quite rewarding. And that's exactly what we want. That keeps morale high. And that's kind of what you guys are doing too, right? Go ahead, Sandeep.
I was going to say, I think we're going to take it one step further, because I think people are going to be able to do multiple jobs that they haven't been able to. Then that's the difference. They could do that one job better because it was so hard in the existing landscape. We're hearing from accountants that they can do accounting and FP&A, that they can do accounting, FP&A, and operations. Why? Because it's all stitched together, and you can, of course, with these consolidated systems, use AI to generate fast, but also learn from the system itself.
Right, right. And you use AI to explain things to you and to give you some context, give you ideas. I mean, the point is, change needs to happen in organizations. I mean, just whether it's tariffs or economic pressures or changing market dynamics, how people buy things is changing, right? All kind of stuff is changing. So change happens. I love your quote. You're either making that change happen or you're on the wrong side of history. So you got to like jump over the fence at some point. But final thoughts from you, Stefan. I think this is really a straw in the wind. I think this is the way things are going to be done in the future. What are your closing thoughts on maybe encouraging people to take a look and figure out how this can help them?
Closing thoughts. I mean, I always have this one cartoon in my mind. Everybody knows that, where there is, one image for what the customer really
That's right. I
wanted,
know. I've
and
seen
then you
it.
see this like a tree and what is it in English?
And a
I don't
swing.
remember. A swing, exactly. And then it goes multiple steps and Chinese whisper until what the developer coded and deployed is totally different.
Right.
This cartoon is not there anymore.
Wow.
Because there is an agreement early on what exactly is specified, and then there is only software and AI that is generating the code. There cannot be a gap anymore.
I
Yeah.
love it.
So, and that's a completely new world, and it's absolutely amazing, and it makes companies more competitive and more
Yeah.
differentiating, because for the first time ever, software is so easy to be transferred into competitive advantage.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, folks, look these gentlemen up online. We are closing the show out today, but check us out as well. Info at insideanalysis.com. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.